Let's move on to vocabulary for processes. Now, as with maps, there are many variables when it comes to processes. However, we can be sure of a couple of things occurring every time. First of all, process talks will always need to discuss stages because stages are an essential part of the definition of a process. As a result, we need to have a variety of stage language, ways of talking about stages. Process talks also often use the language of composition, which should sound familiar because we looked at that in the previous lecture on comparative graphs. Therefore, we need to know two things: how to use the language of composition to describe processes and how to describe stages in a variety of ways. Let's start by looking at the stages. Again, another familiar looking table here. We have 4 different columns: beginning, middle, end, and same time. And I want you to look at the expressions at the bottom of the screen and see if you can match those expressions to the columns above. Again, you can pause the video here, and when you think you've got those together, you can carry on. Okay, so let's have a look. Now notice here that there are not many expressions for beginning and end and at the same time. This is because unless we're looking at more than one process, which is possible, we should only need one phrase from the beginning and end columns because there's really only one beginning and one end. But there are often more stages in the middle. That's why we need lots of expressions here. For example, if you've got a process made up of 8 stages, there'll be one beginning, one end, and 6 middle stages. So it's important that we have a wide range of vocabulary for those middle stages. Now let's look at the language of composition. The language we use to talk about processes can be quite similar to the language you use to talk about pie charts and stacked bar charts, as we mentioned earlier. We just need to modify it a little bit to fit our needs. Let's have a look at this process here. It's looking at central heating in a house. And just follow through this with me. Overall, the process of heating a home is composed of a number of steps. Whereas hot water reaches the taps via a sequence made up of 3 steps, more stages are required for the radiators to be heated. And then we can use it also in the detail paragraphs, after which the boiler, which is a container consisting of gas or oil, heats the water. So, let's see if we can put all of these things together, just like previously with the maps, and come up with a decent, high quality task 1 response. We're going to look at this process over here, looking at cement production and concrete production. At the top, you can see we have mostly stage language, because we wouldn't really use composition language in the first image, but in the second image there's a lot of different percentages and things, and just like you saw with the pie charts, all those percentages, that composition language can be very helpful there. So the second paragraph focuses more on composition language. So again, if you could pause the video here and see if you can fill in the gaps using the first letters to help you, and when you think you're ready, we'll continue. Okay, so let's have a look and see what we've got. So let's go through these together. We'll start with paragraph 1. If we look at the details of cement production, initially limestone and clay are crushed together to form a powder. Next, the powder is mixed by a mixer, after which it is passed through a rotating heater. After being heated, it is then ground by a grinder before being packed into bags as cement. Now if we focus on the second paragraph, focusing on the manufacture of concrete, this is made up of 4 components. Half of concrete is composed of gravel, a quarter consists of sand, and water constitutes a tenth. The remainder is formed of the earlier produced cement. This formula is combined together using a horizontally rotating concrete mixer to create concrete. Now, you might be a little bit confused here by this composition language, because in the previous lecture we talked about looking at the whole at the beginning of the sentence or at the end of the expression. But here, in the place of the whole, you can see language like half of concrete and a quarter, and at the end expression, a tenth. Now this is still okay. Although it doesn't seem like a whole, it is still a whole. It is the whole of that half. It is the whole of that quarter, and it is the whole of that tenth. So the whole of half of concrete, gravel goes into that. So gravel goes into half of concrete. So it's still a whole, but it's just used in a slightly different way. If you would like more clarification on this idea, please ask in the comments, because I know it's a little bit tricky, this composition language, particularly in processes, but hopefully that gives you a good idea of how to use this language when talking about processes. So try and use this language for processes, and try and use the compass and verbs and noun phrases when looking at maps, and see how you get on with paraphrasing the vocabulary.